Revenge doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives with a single quiet word that shakes the walls of an empire. For Caitlin Clark, that word was no. No to Geno Auriemma, no to UConn's once untouchable dynasty, and no to the million-dollar lifeline that came crawling back to her years later, dripping in desperation. This wasn't the kind of revenge you post on social media or scream into a microphone. It was cleaner, sharper, and far more devastating. She didn't lash out. She didn't clap back. She just closed the door. To understand the weight of that decision, you have to remember who Geno Auriemma was, or at least who he thought he was. For decades, he wasn't just a coach. He was the gatekeeper of women's basketball. If Geno called, your future was secure. If he didn't, well, good luck proving yourself. He built UConn into an empire, producing legends like Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, Breanna Stewart. The banners hanging in his gym were more than just championships. They were proof that if you wanted to matter in women's basketball, you needed him. Caitlin Clark, a kid from Iowa with a dream, knew that as well as anyone. UConn was her dream school, her Mount Olympus, and when recruiting time came, she waited for the call that never came. The silence was deafening. Geno had his reasons, at least the ones he said out loud. He already had Paige Buchers locked in, and he didn't want two-point guards. On the surface, it sounded strategic. But then came the insult, the kind you don't forget. He suggested that if Clark really wanted UConn, she should have called him. Imagine that. The greatest recruiter the game had ever seen, the man who prided himself on spotting generational talent before anyone else, decided Caitlin Clark wasn't worth his time. Instead of chasing her, he told a teenager she should have chased him. That wasn't just a recruiting miss. That was arrogance. That was disrespect. And Clark, instead of exploding, simply filed it away. If UConn didn't believe in her, she'd go somewhere that did. Iowa wasn't the glamour pick. No banners, no dynasty, no aura of inevitability. But at Iowa, she wasn't Paige's shadow. She wasn't Geno's afterthought. She was the centerpiece, the one. And from the moment she stepped onto the court in Iowa City, she rewrote everything. Her logo threes weren't just highlights. They were reminders. You missed this. Her sold-out arenas weren't just numbers. They were receipts. Her record-breaking TV ratings weren't flukes. They were proof. Proof that the player Geno brushed aside was now bigger than his program, bigger than his legacy, and bigger than the system he had controlled for decades. And how did he respond? Not with humility, with digs, with shade wrapped in backhanded compliments. He brushed her off as a kid playing like she was still in the driveway. He mocked her fans, calling them delusional, saying they were damaging women's basketball by believing she could be an MVP candidate as a rookie. He went on national radio shows and podcasts and dismissed the very people who had poured millions of new eyes into the sport. Families showing up in Clark jerseys? Delusional. Kids waiting in line for hours to meet her? Clueless. Millions tuning in to watch her break viewership records? Stupid. That was his word, stupid. But here's the thing about arrogance. It ages poorly. Clark didn't clap back. She didn't drag him on Twitter. She didn't need to. She answered the only way that mattered, on the court. Rookie of the Year, all WNBA first team. And when the MVP votes were counted, she finished exactly fourth, right where her supposedly delusional fans predicted she would. The same prediction Geno laughed at became reality. And with that, his credibility cracked. It wasn't just a win for Clark. It was vindication for every fan he mocked, every supporter he dismissed. They weren't clueless. They were right. He wasn't the gatekeeper anymore. She was, and she did it without ever speaking his name. Silent revenge. Night after night, her game delivered the receipts, while his words aged like milk left in the sun. But Geno couldn't let go. He couldn't stomach being wrong, so he kept talking. Interview after interview, podcast after podcast. A little praise, a little dig, a compliment buried in a disclaimer. But the more he spoke, the clearer it became. Clark wasn't just rewriting the game. She was living rent-free in his head. And eventually words weren't enough. If he couldn't control the narrative with sound bites, maybe he could control it with money. That's how the $1 million offer came to be. A brand new league, unrivaled, backed by stars like Breanna Stewart and Napheesa Collier, with Geno lurking behind the curtain as an investor. The league had ambition, it had funding, but it lacked one thing: legitimacy. It needed a face. It needed Caitlin Clark. So they offered her over $1 million for an 8-week season, one of the richest contracts ever dangled in front of a women's basketball player. Let that sink in. The same man who couldn't pick up the phone during her recruitment was now dangling 7 figures begging for her star power to save his project. The same man who dismissed her hype as fan delusion was now trying to monetize it. The same man who once told her she wasn't a priority was now admitting, through his actions, that she was the only priority that mattered. And Clark? She didn't rage. She didn't gloat. She didn't so much as raise her voice. She just said no. No hesitation. No explanation. Just rejection. The kind of rejection that doesn't just close a door, it slams it shut forever. The fallout was brutal. Without Clark, Unrivaled lost its magnet. Investors panicked. The hype cooled. The offer that was supposed to show strength became a confession of weakness. Fans saw it for what it was: desperation. Geno Auriemma, the once untouchable kingmaker, had been reduced to begging for the very player he once brushed aside, and she humbled him with a single word. That's the beauty of this story. Clark didn't just reject a contract. She rejected a system. For decades, Geno and the old guard controlled women's basketball. They decided who got the spotlight, who got the platform, who mattered. But Clark shattered that model. She didn't need his banners. She didn't need his blessing. She built her empire from scratch. She carried the sport into the mainstream on her back, and when he came calling with money, she showed him where the power truly lies. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's a quiet no that echoes louder than any scream. Caitlin Clark didn't just win. She didn't just prove him wrong. She changed the balance of power in women's basketball forever. Do you think Geno deserved it? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss an update.